I moved to Hawaii in 1995 from Seattle, Washington. I kid you not, like the day we drove in and moved in, there was all these kids outside like playing Super Soaker. They were all stoked on like, who's this new like family? Who's this? Yeah, and it was like, you know, like growing up in Hawaii, it's such a melting pot, mixed plate. There's all these kids from all their own backgrounds and different stories too, you know? So Chinese, Filipino, European, Hawaiian, like everything, right? So yeah, I was really happy to be here. I think for a lot of people, they have a similar story. Like my grandma on my mom's side had a small record collection, so we used to listen to records. And I started getting into music probably mostly through skateboarding. You know, you hear the songs on like 411 Video Magazine or any of the skate videos. There's always great music. We used to just jam, like, you know, go skate on the weekends, or if we don't feel like skating, go to somebody's house and jam. And then at some point, my really good friend Ryan Chun was like, yo man, let's go make some beats. And I was like, okay, what does that entail? You know what I mean? Oh, you just get some records and you listen for some loops and you just loop it and you add some drums. Okay, sounds cool. So we went to my house. He brought his auntie's record collection over to my house and we just like listened to stuff and made some loops. And that was kind of like the beginning of my record collection, was like Ryan bringing over these records. Any chance I got, I tried to make any of my school projects like about music. Yeah, and then I was making beats through college. I went to Oregon for school and I had an MPC 1000 at that time. No, none of my parents were really into music. It came with hanging out with people and like skating and just, I don't know, when you grow up skating, like you're just really open to a lot of things, I think. Creative things, yeah. I mean, when I was in high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. But even going to college, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. But I knew I liked music and writing and photography and design and arts. So I signed up for journalism school. So that was my major, journalism. And it was at this time that something that one of my professors had said stuck with me, which was, I encourage you to start a blog and just something to write about. But just make sure it's like, it's an obscure topic or very niche. It was very niche topic. So I don't think I realized it at the time, but when I was living in Portland, I was really homesick. And then these local records from the 70s and 80s started like appearing. So then I thought, oh, I should start a blog and write about these records. And yeah, this is a really niche topic. And then, yeah, just one thing led to another thing, and now I'm here with the store and this record label, and yeah, didn't plan any of this. If I'm remembering correctly, I had tried to start one blog here, one blog there, or maybe a Tumblr, or, you know what I mean? Like, there was always something that, and I think starting a blog about records from Hawaii from back in the day was like, oh, this is it. So I was like uploading stuff to YouTube and putting stuff on my blog and writing about the artists, and just even as simple as writing a review. Oh, I like this record because this and this and this. And then some of the artists started finding my blog and started reaching out. Yeah, and it like satiated the curiosity I had for growing up, collecting records, sampling records, wanting to discover more music, always searching for music. And it also scratched this itch to do storytelling, right? Journalism degree. Maybe most importantly, like I was so homesick living in Oregon and wanted to come back here. And the music is like such a strong connection back to a place, no matter where you're from, you know? So maybe about 6 months to a year after starting it, I moved back to Hawaii. I had a little bit of video experience, and I had taken like Japanese in college for a couple years. I spoke like a tiny bit of it. Before I moved back home, I reached out to this company, this Japanese video company. Hey, I'm moving back home, would love to do an interview for this job you've posted. They said, cool, like we'll set up an interview. So I moved back to Hawaii, and I think 3 days or less after moving back, the tsunami hit the Fukushima area. Needless to say, this Japanese video company, their customer base just like disappeared overnight. So I'm like sitting watching the news, I'm like, this is devastating And I wonder if that job interview is still on the table. So it wasn't. So I got a job like doing marketing for a tour company and blogging actually. So I blogged for a tour company and did like social media marketing. That was a great time in my life because this was like 2011. So a lot of these like Twitter was just coming up, Pinterest was just coming up. Like all of these things were, I think maybe even Instagram had just recently started. Yeah. So the way I like to think about things here, I think a lot of it stems from that time. Yeah. But I got laid off because that company was wild. It was wild. And then I was like, oh, I'll hit up that Japanese video company. It's been 2 years. I'm sure things are coming around. So I went in, got the job, and then worked there for 4 years. So I was still running Aloha Got Soul as a blog this whole time, right? Oh, and then by the time I got the video job, that's when I started to turn Aloha Got Soul into a record label. Yeah, and so I would be doing my day job, editing videos at the office, and then like FedEx is showing up at the front door. Oh, we got a delivery for Roger Bong, Aloha Got Soul. Like, oh yeah. And they bring in like, all these records. So I was like working full time and also having my passion project going at the same time. And like the company was totally cool with it. They got it. The timeline is I started the blog in like 2009 or 10, around there. And then the label came about in 2015. It's like 5 years. But within that time frame, I knew that I wanted to eventually start releasing records, like start a label. So I did like some preliminary research. I prepared myself to at least take the leap of faith and just call Mike Lundy out of the blue and say, hey, I've got this idea. I know I interviewed you for my blog a few years ago, but what if we reissued your album on my soon-to-be launched label? And we had gotten along so well the first time we met that he was like, let's do it, let's go for it. For me, it was having an artist who believed in what I was doing support me, even if there was still a lot of learning to be done. We'll never have everything in place. It's just take the steps, and just keep it going. When we pressed the record, it was a 7-inch single, 2 cuts from Mike Lundy's album. I don't have any experience working for a record label. I don't have any experience working for a record store. I was just blogging and had a journalism degree, right? So the blog had attracted a lot of international interest. So there was this guy in London who reached out. His name is Cedric. Cedric proposed we do some kind of project. I told him, like, I'm starting a label, we're gonna reissue Mike Lundy's record. He was like, oh, I'll help you out, get it distributed in London and Europe. Yeah, so I pressed 500 records. I think I sent like half of them to Cedric in London, and he was like doling it out to different stores and different DJs and collectors out there. It was so funny, I just remember like getting this email from Disc Union, which is a chain of stores in Japan, and they're a distributor as well. But Disc Union, they reached out and said, hey, we love the new Mike Lundy record, like we want to buy copies for our stores in Japan. How many can we get? And at this point I had to write back and was like, I think we have 9 left. They're like, okay, we'll just take all 9. Okay, cool. We ended up repressing it and they took more. Okay. Yeah, but that was my first experience pressing a record. It was like, oh, there's people who want this stuff. Cool. I do think that this was the first time that AGS made some revenue. And it funded the next release and the next release. That's not the case across the board, but it's great to like be able to keep it going. I was still working full time too. I was still working, yeah. Anywhere from 40 to 60, probably more like 60 hours a week. So it was a lot. But I was in my 20s, so I had more energy. And I had this feeling that I'm putting all this energy and time into someone else's company, business. I need to at least somehow try and match that and put something into my own. Because at the end of the day, and I mean, I don't think everyone would feel that way. And I'm not saying that that's the right way to do it. But I'm just saying for me, I was putting in so much work here. At the end of the day, when I got home, I was like, I at least need to do something. Like write a blog post, send out an email, or post something, make a mix, whatever. So I was trying to like balance out that. I knew when I wanted to quit my full-time job when I realized I can't give both of these 100% anymore. Because I'm the kind of worker who wants to do a good job for this company. I had a great time at this full-time video company that I was working for. But it came a time where I was putting in too much on both sides to where one of them or both of them were suffering. So I had to stop doing one of them so that the other could continue to be healthy, I guess. Oh, this was 2017, so I think I had just turned maybe 30, yeah. Yeah, is that right? Yeah. When I quit my full-time job, I had saved up enough to help me get by for at least a certain amount of time. I don't know if it was 6 months or a year. I went into it knowing that I could fall back on freelancing, doing videos, and I also thought I could start DJing more to pay the bills. But I was really putting a lot of pressure on myself to put out releases and run a proper record label that was bringing in enough income to support me and my household at the time. I don't know, it was super stressful. It went on for a lot of years. Well, this is to the end of 2017. So then into 2018, I was like a freelancer, like self-employed entrepreneur. But it never really amounted to any point where I felt like, oh, this is it. This is good. No, it was like so much, there was always so much pressure on myself to try to get the record label to a certain level where I was like, yep, this makes sense. And so it was really stressful because I felt like, oh, we just got to put out a lot of records all the time. I don't know, it's a lot of work chasing down artists and being like, building their trust, getting their permission, and then doing the manufacturing side of it, and then doing the marketing side of it. So there's a lot of moving parts. I put so much pressure on myself. I think the pandemic was like a godsend. Like in the sense that it pumped the brakes on everything, and also there was financial support for self-employed, you know, and so it gave me this chance to really like pull back and slow down and think, okay, what do I really need to focus on? What's really important here? Like this is what happens to a lot of small business owners or entrepreneurs. They end up, or people who turn their hobby into their job, they end up not enjoying it anymore. Because it's like, it's not fun anymore. You're just paying taxes, doing accounting, doing this,
So how did you combat that?
Oh shit.
Did I?
No. How did I I'm still figuring it out. What I've learned in recent times more than ever is the importance of trying not to do too much, trying not to do everything, because it's very easy to get trapped into that. Like obviously there's a lot of great records out there that we would love to reissue or represent to listeners nowadays. And there's a good chance that we'll never get around to all of them. And there was a time where I felt like, no, we need to do as much of everything as we can and get all of this music back out there. But I think I've come to terms in recent years with being okay with not doing everything that we want to do. We love this album or this single so much, we're going to put it out, but then you see it doesn't perform well and you don't make that money back. It's just the reality of running a record label. And then other releases do really well and support, you know, make up for the other ones you don't. Yeah. But there's like a ceaseless amount of business advice and pressure that exists out there. And there's a lot of pressure on young people to have it all figured out in your 20s into your 30s, when the reality is like so few people have actually figured out any of it. And they're just rolling with the punches and trying to make a life that works for them. And I think that that's super important for myself to realize is that there may never be a point in which I feel like I've reached that threshold that I was talking about. And that's okay. Like, I want to be here in the moment now and appreciate what's in front of me. And if that means working with 4 artists instead of 40, that's cool, you know, because I can form relationships and make a strong connection with these 4 artists. And then in 2021, I had enough working on my record label out of my apartment, out of a storage unit. I was like shipping records out of my apartment. You know, me and my partner at the time, we were like packing orders in the bedroom, just like, I didn't know where to get mailers to ship out records, so I went to the post office and like just got a bunch and then cut them all, and I was just like, I hate my life. And then I had a storage unit in like 2020, 2021, and I was packing orders out of the storage unit. And so I think it was like, yeah, I think it was maybe January 2021 where I kind of had this thought in my head, like, man, it'd be great to have a space to just like store everything, homework separation. No more records at home, no more boxes at home, no more shipping supplies at home. Move everything just like by pure chance. I was having coffee with a friend, Ben King from Moon Collective, who you may know. We were having coffee and then his friend showed up and was like, oh, I just saw this space for rent on McCully. I'm looking for this spot. It wasn't quite the spot for me, but yeah, it was cool. And I was like, yo, what's the space? And it was this one. And when he told me, I was like, man, I need to talk with the landlord here. Got the number, checked the space out, and by April of 2021, we signed the lease. So the initial intention was not to open a store, but when we saw the space, we thought it would be great to have a record store. There's only 2 other ones on the island, Hungry Ear and Ideas, right? Honolulu needs a 3rd record store. And we knew we wanted to do it like curated, focused, boutique style, kind of like a modern record store. I wanted it to be a record store that wasn't a record store. You don't walk in and there's like, smells a certain way, there's like stuff's disorganized, it's not very clean, the people judge you on your music tastes. Like, I don't know if you've seen High Fidelity, but this is like a classic trope, right, of being in a music store. It's like, oh, you're buying this record?
Now, why would you sell it to me and not to him?
Because you're not a geek, Louis.
You guys are snobs.
No, we're not.
No, seriously, you're totally elitist. You feel like the unappreciated scholars, so you shit on the people who know less than you. No, which is everybody.
Yeah.
It's just sad. That's all.
I was like, no, we don't do that here. So we opened the store and almost immediately things clicked. Oh, I've been working so hard on the record label and trying to get releases going and steady enough to where they provide a certain income, right? But there's so much work that goes into putting one release out. You're an artist, Taylor. You know how much work goes into putting one EP out, one song out. You know what I mean? And then you get you see the return. You're like, oh man, this doesn't make sense. So when we opened the store, almost right away we saw, oh, this is it. This is like the day in, day out bread and butter. This is what's going to support what we're doing. It made sense, and the community people were ready for it. So people started coming, yeah. And when we first opened in 2021, it was just me and my partner at the time. And so we were staffing this place. And it was 4 days a week we were open. So then fast forward, going into 2022, my partner at the time had decided, like, I think it's time for me to try a different career path. You know, working here at the store is great, but I think there's something else for me out there. And I thought, oh, that's great. I'm happy that this realization is coming. And it was around that time that I then reached out to my longtime friend of many years, Oliver Seguin, who now works at the store. He's like a staple fixture, like he's the guy. People always think he's the owner. He's like, he's like huge, big energy, always very hospitable and welcoming. And yeah, he's the man, he's great. So I reached out to Oliver at the beginning of 2022, got him working here part-time. As the year went on, that's when like things just started to happen in my life, and the burnout just like hit me. I saw it coming, actually. I saw it coming the year prior, leading up, but then finally by summer of 2022, it was just like, I had to check out. I like hit rock bottom, so to speak. I was like, I need to take a break, big time. And thank God for Oliver. He's like, do whatever you gotta do. I'll hold it down here. And so yeah, Oliver and Max held it down. We also had another guy, Micah McDermott. He runs Night March. And then got them to a point where they could do everything, pretty much everything that I was doing, running the store. Oliver, Max, and we have another employee, Lulu, who works here. Micah's no longer with us. They got it. They hold it down, and I can take breaks when I need to. I can focus on other things. I can focus on the original inspiration for Aloha Got Soul in the first place, which is like working with artists, connecting with artists, storytelling. It's allowed me to like return to, and it's interesting because I didn't necessarily always want a record store, but it just so happened to make sense. I think there's a lot of ways to run a record label. I appreciate that because that allows anyone who has a label to do it their own way. So there's this really great technique of looking at like what are the areas you work in, okay, how much revenue do they make and how much time does it take to do it, right? So for releases, they take a lot of time and money to make for a very small return, majority of the time, especially when you're working in pressing vinyl, right? It's expensive. But then on the other end of that spectrum, like sync licensing takes a very small amount of effort for very potentially high return. The barrier to entry there though is getting connected to the people who are responsible for selecting music for these TV productions, film productions. But the moment you're connected with them, it's a lot easier to place music into shows. We've been very fortunate with AGS from day one because there's not a lot of competition here in this space that we're doing, which is primarily record focused, right? So on the release side of that, when we put a record out, there's record stores around the world who are looking to put interesting, good music into their bins. We are one of them. You know, we have, if you look at our new music bins, there's music from around the world that we're listening to and digging for on a distributor's website. And we're like, oh, let's bring that in. It's like some house music from Denmark. You know what I mean? And then the person in Denmark's like, I never thought my record would be in a store in Hawaii. Well, vice versa. We're putting out music onto vinyl, and then there's a record store in Belarus or something, or Switzerland that's like, oh, Aloha Got Soul, this sounds cool. Okay, we'll bring in some copies. And then you have people in the record store in Switzerland like, what, from Hawaii? Us choosing to go down this niche path of records, the entry point is there's a lot less friction. You know, the record store provides for us, the staff. You know, we can live our lives and do what we love and get paid for it. That's the record store. And the record label supports the artists that we work with. We're not at any point where we're making money to support ourselves as the staff, but we can at least support artists in some way. It's not in any way that they can buy a house or whatever with it. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? But at least we're supporting them in our small way. Putting out a record and then, cool, you know, Nicadrio Lee, his record can now be found in stores on the East Coast, the West Coast, in other countries. And for him, you know, he's not, to be quite honest, we have not made money off of that record. Like, we're still in the red. And Nika knows that, and I tell him, we talk about it from time to time. But it was just a risk that I wanted to take because I like the music. But that is to say that even then, still, he feels like his artistry is supported in that way, you know? So I think what I'm saying is like the label side I've learned can't provide everything for an artist, but it can support them in a certain way, whereas the store can support us and our livelihoods, and we can just keep going and doing what we love, you know? So we're working on this compilation right now, thinking to call it Mix Plate, which represents new music from Hawaii, stuff that's been released within the past 4 years at the most, maybe even 2 years. Part of the purpose behind doing this is there's so much great new music coming out of Hawaii, but and so we want to support it in our way that we know best, which is to put out a record. And who knows what's going to happen? We put out a compilation, we'll press 500 copies, it'll get out to these stores around the world, and then someone in Germany is going to be listening to Temple Waves and then hit you guys up and be like, oh, I love that song. I love that song. You guys have anything else? And maybe, who knows, that'll spark something with Temple Waves to be like, we should do a record or something. I don't know, you know, it's like, this is up to you guys, but we're just trying to do our part. DJing is tough because I come in and out of wanting to do it and not wanting to do it.
Okay.
To be a working DJ, I think the majority of the time, to sustain yourself, you have to be playing gigs that, it just comes with the job, but you have to cater to the audience and the expectations of the venue. And that could mean like playing music where people are just like, no, this doesn't work, pick it up. Like, you know, can I put in a request? Like, and I don't think that that's what a DJ is for. I think a DJ is for soundtracking a mood of a space or educating a listener but there's other DJs who like throw parties and they can cater to the audience in that way, expectations in that way. So I come in and out of like wanting to DJ and not DJ. I think right now I'm kind of like back on the tip of like, this is super fun. I would love to do it more. My analog journal, I'm so happy that that happened. But yeah, I reached out and asked them, what does it take to do a set? And their response was, pitch a theme, have a theme. Yeah, looking through their channel, they didn't have any stuff from Hawaii. It felt like that was a gap that needed to be filled. Because now we're getting people coming into the store. How'd you hear about us? Oh, I saw the My Analog Journal thing on YouTube. It's like, oh, sick. So we realized, or maybe we knew beforehand, but we realized that this effort of going on to something that's in London would feed back into what we're doing here in a very real and important way. Yeah, so everything that we're trying to do, now that we have a home base with the storefront, we're trying to feed it back into here. Yeah. If you go back and listen to that set and read the description, a lot of the music I was playing was stuff we've released on our label over the years. And so in a way, it was my way of thanking the artists who have believed in us and said, yes, we give you permission to release our music. So the majority of what I played on that set was stuff from our label or musicians we've worked with. That's what we thrive off of too as collectors. It's like finding these gems that nobody else hears or knows, you know, and then dropping it at just the right time. That's the kind of stuff that I feel like makes sense to do.
Okay.
Those kind of sets where it's like, it's perpetuating the whole AGS thing that we're doing. Yeah. Yeah. But at the same time, I also enjoy playing in like a club setting.
Okay.
Not like a nightclub setting, but more like play the right tunes to make people dance. Yeah. Well, now we have our own YouTube channel for the store, and we have a community space here at the store, and we throw events and we film the DJs when they're spinning at the events, kind of thing. I'm realizing now that this YouTube channel and this effort that we're doing there, that what our channel is providing is a glimpse into what's happening on the ground here. This slice of like, what are music selectors in Hawaii doing? Not just, oh, what's the music from Hawaii sound like? That's what the label is doing. But it's like, what are DJs, what are collectors, what are music lovers doing in Hawaii? Kalapana is interesting because it's such a staple of identity in Hawaii, right? Everybody knows them and loves them and their music, but unfortunately, they didn't own their music for 40 years. So from, I think their first album was 1975, all the way up until I think the year was 2016 when they finally got their rights back. And this is, if anyone remembers, this is why you couldn't listen to their music on digital platforms. It was not on Spotify, for example, or Apple Music, right? There's a label in California called Manifesto. The guy who runs that, he found out that Kalapana didn't own their own music. And so he went in to right that wrong. And he helped the band get their rights back. And now his label Manifesto represents Kalapana's catalog and Kalapana as a band. I at some point got some kind of promotional email from them when they re-released all their music back on the CD. So I think I got that email. I was like, oh, that's cool. But we're just running the label and we're working with like underground artists, and we're like, you know, I don't know that we'll ever get to that level. And then a few years later, a friend of mine in New York, his name is Phil, he goes by Sticky Doja is his DJ name. I think he had mentioned like, wouldn't it be great to have a Kalapana 7-inch like box set we could DJ with, right? I was like, oh, that's kind of a good idea. Actually, I can hit up the label that represents them now because I remember seeing this email, right? So I went back and I found that and I was like, okay. So I just cold called this label, Manifesto, and pitched them Aloha Got Soul and what we do. And I was basically like, hey, love what you guys have done. It's amazing that you've gotten Kalapana's rights back and all the work that you're doing. I saw that the music's now available digitally. I saw that you guys did CDs. Is there any plans to do vinyl? And their response was, nope, no plans to do vinyl. And so that's where I was like, well, we would love to do that. Let's talk, can we talk about it? The process was actually not as drawn out as one might imagine. It happened pretty quickly, and we were also fortunate enough to throw in like, can we also do some merchandise? And they're like, yeah, this is, if you want to do merchandise, these are the terms. And we were like, why not? You know what I mean? I think to be honest, my approach was the band has gone through a lot in the past 40 years. So for me to approach any of the individual members might be more than what I'm bargaining for, right? So then when I noticed that there's a label that is representing them in the proper way, let's just go that avenue because we know that they'll take care of everybody. And you know, I've spoken to Sebastian Fury a few times. He's like, yeah, thank you so much, you know. Like they get royalty checks and they see like one line is like, this much from Aloha Got Soul. It's like, oh. Yeah, Kalapana was like the success that it was for us, largely in part of Micah McDermott's work. He designed all the shirts and the merchandise. He put together like all the events to celebrate the release and everything, releases, which if he weren't in the picture, I don't know that we would have done that. Yeah, because like I was saying, like I was burning out, and so to find the motivation to do all of what we did with Micah at the helm, like yeah, it would have been very difficult for me on my own. We did this video on our YouTube with a guy named Donnie Martin, and Donnie Martin was Mackie Fury's best friend, and Donnie Martin was and still is very closely connected to a lot of these bands from that era, a lot of these musicians. One morning I opened the shop and I look outside and Uncle Donnie's crossing the street with someone. He gets in and he's like, oh Raj, I want you to meet Brother Noland. They've been really good friends for a long time too. And yeah, Brother Noland's like, yeah, I like what you guys do. We should work together. And I was like, what? For real? He's like, yeah, my daughter takes care of all my business stuff. I'll just link you guys. And that was that. Personally, for me, what has been really helpful is to not hold myself to a certain expectation of being productive. You know, I feel like for many years I've like put this pressure on myself to be productive. I'll get this stuff done. You have your to-do list, do these things today. Releasing myself from that pressure has been like the biggest help. Yeah, I used to wake up and be like, okay, check my to-do list like first thing in the morning, or like check my email, fire off emails first thing in the morning. It's not healthy, you know. It helps you get to a certain point if you're trying to build something, but at the same, like at what cost? I think no matter what, everyone's path is going to be their own path. And so even to look up to someone is a great thing to do because you can learn a lot from them. They can even potentially become your mentor if you're able to get close to them. But I think it's important to go at your pace and what you feel works for you at that time in your life. We're operating at this level now where things make sense to sustain ourselves and to support artists in a capacity that we feel at least inspires enough people for them to keep doing what they're doing, right? So now we can appreciate more than ever the value of the community and the connections that we're making. And at the end of the day, there's like, you can't put any sort of monetary value on that at all, you know? Like these connections you make with people, that's what you're gonna take to your grave with you. Like, I don't know how else to put it, but it's not easy. Yeah, but like you said at the beginning of this whole thing, you're like, oh, I could always get a job later. Like, I think there's no harm in going that route. Then there's no shame if you want to jump off the cliff and then come back on top of the cliff and be like, you know what, I'm gonna go back to this for a little bit. Like, whatever works, you know? Yeah, like I don't think anyone needs to quit their day job until they're really, really certain that it needs to happen. Because like the stress that comes with not having a steady income can be pretty devastating or debilitating. Yeah, yeah. But at the same time, if a pandemic hits and your whole clientele base is gone, you know, having that steady job is like, doesn't exist anymore. If you've made it this far in the video, thank you for watching. I hope that there's something that you've gotten out of this. And if you're in Honolulu, if you live here, if you're visiting, come by the shop. The neighborhood we're in is quaint, it's residential. We don't have any parking, sorry, but you know, it's totally worth making the effort to come down here, and we will welcome you warmly, and you'll go home feeling good about it, I hope. Yeah. And check us out on YouTube. Yeah. Thanks, Taylor. Cool.